Alright, welcome back to another, devblog. This is the Zachlam M3. Targa, most likely mispronounced, but I have no idea how the Jews decided to pronounce this anyways. Um, Maybe I'll look it up for the next time there's something coming for them. And this is a very interesting vehicle. Before I read anything out, I mean, just look at it. You have an M3 half-track with S11 missiles. This entire thing, it may actually, I was first thinking that this thing is going to be obsolete and utter garbage. But I've been thinking about it, right? The M3 half-track, as it also says here, is somewhat mobile. It is very, very small for anything at its BR. Like, this thing is fucking tiny. And as you can see, I think it's better to see on the pictures here, yep. You have the binocular here. I am going to assume that you're actually aiming with this. That means you can actually place this behind full and solid cover, right? Like barricades and whatnot. It doesn't even have to be a hill, right? Even a fucking wall would work. Because the missiles are aiming upwards. That means they fly over the cover you're sitting behind, where it's impossible to hit you. And if you know how to use these missiles correctly, you can very easily maneuver them into enemy vehicles. So this may actually be very interesting to play. Although I don't think I'll be able to because I think it's well, it's beta locked, if I'm not mistaken, like our tech trees. But this is actually something that I would like to try out in the future. It's a pretty cool idea, not gonna lie. Anyways, let's actually read the devblog, right? I spent like 2 minutes and haven't said anything yet. The Zachlam M3 Targa is an ATGM carrier domestically developed by Israeli engineers on the basis of the American M3 and M5 half-tracks, which were fitted with French S-11 missiles. This unique new ground vehicle will avoid tankers in upcoming Israeli ground forces tree, arriving on War Thunder as part of the next major update. Alright, it's rank 5, obviously coming from Israel. Features deadly S-11 missiles, good mobility. It is obviously lightly armored, right? It's fucking half-track. Limited number of missiles. The question is how limited. Because if it's just a 4, then that is going to be a problem. And it doesn't look like it actually has the space to store 4 more. With 8 missiles, I think this vehicle could be used, otherwise it would be mostly a gimmick vehicle. But let's read the history. They will probably tell us the amount of rockets further down. Anyway, shortly after the founding of the Israeli state during the post-war period, its armed forces began being supplied by the Allied countries. Among the equipment provided to Israel were also variants of the American M3 half-track. At the start of the 1960s, however, Israel also acquired a number of French S-11 missiles, or Targa in Israeli service. Okay, the missiles are called Targa, alright. In order to equip its first unit with the new technology and train maintenance specialists. Around the same time, Israeli engineers modified some M3 half-tracks in service at the time as APCs in order to enable them to carry the newly acquired S-11 missiles and effectively convert the vehicle into a missile carrier. Being officially commissioned into service by the Israeli Defense Force, I think, in 1962 the vehicle was first publicly shown during a military parade in April 1963. Service the Zachlam missile carrier saw limited combat action as it mostly equipped IDF auxiliary units or those tasked with a defensive role. Nonetheless, the Zachlam M3 participated in the Six-Day War, took part in combat operations on the Sinai Peninsula. The vehicle remained in service with the IDF until 1969 before being officially decommissioned, while the remaining S-11 missiles retrieved from them were subsequently used during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And Waffen the Zachlam M3 Targa will be one of the more unique vehicles awaiting tankers in the upcoming Israeli ground forces tree. Arriving to the game as part of the next major update. Compact, nimble, and equipped with deadly anti-tank guided missiles, Zachlam M3 Targa represents an interesting and Israeli twist on a chassis familiar to most tankers in War Thunder. What will certainly draw the most attention from a tank commander's perspective is the Zachlam's primary and indeed only weapon system, namely the S-11 missiles or Targas. They are known in Israeli service. These first-generation guided anti-tank missiles are well familiar to seasoned War Thunder tank commanders, as they can be found on a number of vehicles at the higher ranks. While promising a high destructive potential, their effectiveness is highly dependent on the tanker's gunnery skills due to the missiles requiring manual guidance. So you use the same buttons most likely you use to drive your vehicle. So WASD. At least that's the case for me. I think you can put these buttons elsewhere, but I doubt anyone actually does that, because you still cannot move anyways while you fire one. By promising a high destructive potential, their effectiveness is highly dependent on the tanker's gunnery skills to the... Oh, okay, I just read that out, sorry. However, players will be able to research the semi-automatic guidance version of the missile as well. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I think that will be mouse guided then. But this is interesting. I'm gonna have to see how this actually works in game. Because once it's available, I'm actually going to try this thing out. Furthermore, advanced armor such as arrow or composites significantly reduce the missile's destructiveness. Nonetheless, a skilled tanker can still make good use of the weapon to severely damage or outright knock out unsuspecting enemies from up to 3.5 kilometers away. Okay, 3.5 kilometers is very ambitious, just alone because of the maps in game. In doing so, however, commanders should keep in mind that the Zahlam's ammunition capacity is severely limited, though. In fact, the vehicle only carries 2 additional S-11 missiles after the 4 preloaded ones are expended from the launcher, so make your shots count. Okay, that's a problem, because larger vehicles like the King Tiger and whatnot, and even Centurion tanks can usually tank one missile, and unless you actually hit the ammunition and that actually blows up, you need at least 2 of them. That means you have a potential of 3 kills on average with this thing. Assuming you're 2 shot on average. Especially hitting moving targets isn't that easy with this. Unless of course you play arcade, in that case you can just point your mouse at it, but... Yeah, this is mostly going to be a gimmick vehicle, as I've suspected. Anyways, because this Salam didn't... Ah, okay, that's a typo. It's based on the familiar M3 half-track chassis. The vehicle also inherited the good mobility from the American base model. Thanks to its low mass and 143 horsepower engine, the Zahlam can reach a top speed of around 67 km on paved roads while only dropping slightly in less hospitable terrain types thanks to its half-track design. On the other hand, being just a simple APC by design means that the Zahlam, another typo, can't boast about its protection. In fact, the vehicle is only sufficiently protected to withstand rifle caliber fire and shrapnel damage. To be honest, it's really not, because if it faces an American vehicle, anything with an American MG, it's just gonna hit through. On the other hand, unlike the base model found in other nations, the Zahlam's crew is better protected from enemy air, as they are all situated in the armor's driver cabin in the front portion of the vehicle. That actually makes it less resistant against aircraft, because what makes the M16, M13, etc. usually survive one hit or one run of an aircraft is, assuming they don't shoot it down, being AAs and all that, is that the pilot has to usually decide if they're gonna hit the gunner or the front portion. Usually they're going for the gunner because you don't want to be shot by that. Unless of course you're coming from that behind, but yeah, most people don't do this much maneuvering, especially not over an AA piece. With all people there, you're just gonna aim at the cabin. And assuming you have cannons, you're going to penetrate and they're all dead. So that's actually not making it any more survivable against aircraft. So yeah. Ah yeah, here it says. The Zahlam M3 Tiger will be arriving in War Thunder as part of the upcoming Israeli Ground Forces Tree of release of the next major update. Interestingly, they haven't said... Ah, okay, yeah, here it says. Packs are to be discounted by the start of Israeli Ground Forces CBT. So if you wait until the ground... how do I say that? Once the closed beta test actually comes around, so with the next update, the Israeli things are going to be discounted, if I read that correctly. But yeah, as I said, this is one of the more interesting vehicles coming out. Of the most interesting one is the next one I'm going to talk about. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's not going to be good, but I like vehicles like this. And it has an interesting vehicle, having taken part in the 6 Days War, etc. Sabaton actually made a very good song about that war. And I don't know, I find the idea with those missiles on top looking a bit derpy and all kinda cool. Anyways, I'm interested to see what you think. Of course, I know that there's a lot of people that have problems with Israel being on War Thunder, and I sometimes debated about that as well. But just looking at this vehicle itself, I think it's actually kinda neat. How everything will play out, we will have to see. But this is a cool addition, in my opinion, anyways. I would have liked it in the game even without the Israeli tree, like in the US tree or something like that. Anyways, thank you for listening, and goodbye.